Gentlemen, we're live.
Gentlemen, this is Frank Forza. I'm here with my good friends Noah Green, Jordan Wirth. We are Everyman BJJ. Every 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I think it's Pacific Time now. They don't even say Pacific Standard Time anymore. It's Pacific Time, 4:30 Eastern Time. So they changed that, guys. We're here. We're going to talk life. Yeah, we're going to talk life philosophy on and off the mats, and we could even talk about I don't know. Just talking about myself. A lot going on in the world. You guys know how much I have an affinity for random conversation. So, and by the way, I just saw this guy this is 2020, right? I just saw this guy who walked by with an Iron Maiden shirt. And I don't know if you know who Iron Maiden is, Jordan?
Of course I know who Iron Maiden is.
All right. Yeah. When's the last time you saw an Iron Maiden shirt? When you and I were younger, like 30 years ago, you saw a lot of Iron Maiden shirts, man.
Yeah, the headbangers.
Years ago.
Yeah, the headbangers.
I just saw one. That shirt's got to be 30 years old. It's got to be.
Believe it or not, a lot of kids still wear like Iron Maiden and those old shirts like that, Frank. They sell them at like Hot Topic and a lot of these a lot of these t-shirt stores. They sell those old 80s rock band shirts. So like, it's still somewhat of a popular thing.
I need some cultural decoding. What's the deal with the explosion of NASA shirts, Jordan?
An explosion of what shirts?
NASA
shirts?
Yeah.
I haven't seen one yet, brother.
What? Okay. In New York, it was like everyone's wearing NASA shirts.
You know what I really, really want to get that I want to go to the Trump Tower and get?
Oh.
I want to get a space, what is it? A Space Force shirt. I really want to get a Space
That's
Force.
That's good.
What happened to the Space Force? Trump announced the Space Force and now just never was announced again?
No, they just they're launching their space orbital secret vehicle this week. It's like the S. It's got you just look at space orbital vehicle NASA, and they're launching that thing. It's got a lot of goodies on it apparently.
By the way, though, in keeping with the NASA theme, first of all, I think that a lot of people are trying to seem like they're smart or something. Like I guess if you're affiliated with NASA, you're pretty smart. You're enlightened.
Is that what it is? I thought it was.
But going back when I graduated college in the 90s, I lived right outside of Washington, D.C., probably about 15, 20 miles outside of Washington, D.C., and my roommate worked for NASA, and he worked on the launches. I mean, these were like significant launches, and he worked on the launches. And what was remarkable about that, he was a smart guy. He was an Italian guy, nice guy. But he only had three passions, and one was whatever he did at NASA as a scientist. The other was video games, right? He used to play, remember the Sega? He was addicted. He played those video games at the wee hours in the morning, and he loved alcohol.
Sega.
He had a really bad drinking problem, and he was the first person that I ever actually knew. Great guy, but he had his issues, and he got a bunch of DUIs, and it was really expensive, right? They took his license. Then when they gave him his license back, he would do those interlock ignitions, right? So in order to start your car, you'd have to blow into the thing in order to start your car. So the poor guy, I mean, well, that's the poor guy, it's his own fault, but I remember he would go on dates and he'd be like, wish me luck, because the woman that he was dating wouldn't know that he had to pretty much tell every woman about his situation with the DUIs because back then we would still pick up women for a date, right? Nowadays, nobody picks up a woman for a first date. Back in our era, Noah, you went on a date. It was common to, hey, I'll pick you up at 7, right?
That's right.
Nowadays, your first date, there's a 90% chance that woman's going to meet you there. You're not picking her up, right? Because the woman want an out. They don't want to be a captive audience to a 2 or 3 hour date. They want to
be free to go.
They want an out, right? At 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes in, they don't like it. So, but back then, he used to pick them up, right? He used to pick them up, and then just to start his car, he'd have to blow in that interlock ignition. So he'd come back at night and it'd be like, hey, how'd it go? Well, usually it would just downhill because, like, right from the moment he picks them up, they see the interlock ignition. He's got to blow in that thing, and the car won't start, right? Unless you're sober. So anyway, that was my experience working and living. Had a roommate who worked for NASA, and the thing was crazy is he loved alcohol, and he was getting blitzed and he was going and working on their launches, whatever space launches they had.
Man.
And I was like, wow.
Man, lots of people are on drugs, whether it's alcohol, prescription drugs, or illegal drugs. A lot of people are on drugs at work.
Yeah. That space plane, by the way, is called the X-37B, as in Bravo.
Ooh.
Whoa.
BX
Hey.
Bravo. Wow.
Yeah. Hey, I watched UFC fight last night. To turn to our passions. During this quarantine, I've become like crazy about watching fights every night. Like I have to get my fix every night. And I've already gone through the Dana White's Contender Series for the 3rd season.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how to get a hold of the first 2 seasons. But I'm seeing a lot of these fighters. They're like, yeah, this is the. They'll say this is the Dana White Contender Series winner. So I've been getting a lot of background fight. Watching.
I know every time I correspond with you, you've always like, I'm watching this fight. I'm watching this episode of this. Have you seen these fights?
Yeah.
Again, before we went live, Jordan was telling us how he thought today was Saturday, right? And today's Sunday.
Yeah.
And like that's such a common thing right now. I mean, so many people don't know what day it is, right? I mean, it's just like and you're just locked there and like
I thought for sure today was Saturday, man.
Yeah.
I was confident.
Yeah. You're not alone. I mean, there are literally stories in the mainstream now about people don't know what day it is.
That's good.
And Noah's just in his little UFC bubble, just becoming an encyclopedia of. That's one thing I love about Noah. I just wrote a letter of recommendation for those who don't know. I've known Noah about 7 years, and I just proudly wrote him a letter of recommendation. We won't mention the school or whatever, but it's a great program. And one thing that I've always admired about Noah, because Noah and I, we've said it, if you watch this program, hopefully you're going to watch Everyman BJJ a lot, and we'll grow our following. But if you watch this, you'll see that Noah and I come from very different perspectives and prisms, and Jordan is very unique too, and he's got his unique perspective. And yet, there are a number of things I really admire about Noah, and one of them is, Noah, when you dig in on something, you really dig in on it. You're not. It's like Don Miguel Ruiz in the 4 Agreements. He says, be precise with your word. And if Noah says he's going to be there at 6 p.m. and he's going to do it, he shows up on time prepared. If he says he's going to do it, when you dig in, there's not a lot of halfway with you. So I like that about you. You become this nerd. You become this geek, and you've got to know every little thing about the gadget. And I really admire that about you, and I want to say what I admire about you because we do disagree on content. So,
well, thank you.
We got to remember the common ground too.
Well, I can't wait to start getting into all things 10th planet systems. I really am excited about becoming. Back it up a little bit. Oh yeah, no, I couldn't see the best part of it. Yeah, that looks nice. Eddie Bravo was on Joe Rogan's podcast last night. They're doing a fight companion.
Oh, I haven't watched it yet. I gotta watch it.
He talked a lot about his role on Tony Ferguson's ringside.
I seen a 10-minute clip on just that part of the podcast.
Yeah.
He's talking about like how he's not an MMA coach and how he thought he shouldn't have been in there and stuff.
He broke. Who's not an MMA? Give me perspective here.
So what Jordan is referring to, since I opened this topic up, last night, Joe Rogan does these fight companions.
Right,
so
I know,
Brendan Schaub, I can't remember his name, Brian Callen, and Eddie Bravo's on there, and they wanted to get out. That was a perfect time for Eddie Bravo to explain why he did not throw in the towel on the team. He said, well, first off, that's not the jiu-jitsu ground guy. He's like, I'm a special teams kind of person in the NFL paradigm. I'm there for the ground game. I'm not the MMA coach. I'm not the head coach. So that's a head coach call. And Eddie broke that down quite a bit about what his role is and what his qualifications for that fight. And and he went quite deep into how Tony Ferguson's taking this loss and his perspective, which is pretty good. This is just another fight.
Can I interject just for you?
Fire away.
We'll take it piece by piece. So I appreciate you guys bringing this up. I did not see the Fight Companion. I'm very familiar with, Joe, having worked at UFC and then having met him, and I've met Eddie too, and I've competed against some of Eddie's students. And but I love this topic of throwing the towel, the debate of who gets to throw in towels, and first of all, I love the topic, and having followed. I've been ringside for a lot of boxing matches too, and
cool.
It's more common. This whole notion, by the way, technically, this is an interesting. You'll appreciate this, Noah, since you're such a smart geek, and I say that as a compliment. But technically, throwing in the towel has only the referee can stop it. So us throwing in the towel does not stop the fight. Us throwing in the towel maybe signals to the referee. Only the referee or the ringside physicians have the right to stop the fight. So merely us throwing in the towel does not stop the fight. It's not like, okay, fight's over, towel's been thrown in. It's a nice symbolic gesture, but the actual referee has that discretion and that power. But what's interesting about that is because a lot of people will say, especially in boxing, where you see, they take so many more headshots, and you can take so much more damage with the 10-ounce gloves and the 12-ounce gloves. And so, the old days of boxing, they let them take a lot of damage, right? I mean, the refs just would not stop fights, right? I mean, there was just crazy damage. And every once in a blue moon, you'd see somebody come from behind, right? You see, this fight should have been stopped, this fight should have been stopped, and then somebody would actually win, right? And once in a blue moon, which would sort of reinforce, don't stop the fight, right? And so what's interesting about that is you have ringside physicians who can stop the fight, right? Who can come in. You have the referee. And so a lot of people will blame it on the corner, but the reality is you're counting on the expert eye of the ringside physicians and on the referee. It's not fair always to put it at the feet of the corner, even though the corner can know their fighter, right? But it's not, it's complicated for the corner because you can't expect the corner because the corner has an attachment to the fighter and the corner knows the fighter's wishes. So some corners are thinking, hey, I want to protect my fighter, right? Some corners are thinking, I want to protect my fighter. But a lot of corners are thinking, I want to honor what my fighter would want. There's a difference there, right? It's like one thing is, what would Noah want in the fight? Noah would not want me to stop this, right? And sometimes you have the corners that will honor your wish because they know the spirit that you have, and and they don't want to violate that. It's not just they want to get fired. People say, well, the corner doesn't want to stop the fight because they don't want the fighter to fire him afterwards, right? It's not just that. It's that they feel like a lot of times the corner has the same fighting code, which is, dude, fight until you can't fight anymore. That's what fighters do. Keep going, So it's hard for a lot of the elite corners to stop because they always think their fighter has a chance, or they know that the wishes, the desire, the wiring of the fire, like Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell used to always say to the referees, the referee would come back there, check their hands, give them instructions, even before the fight, not just in the fight. The referees go and meet with the fighters before the fight. They stop in their dressing room and they'll talk with them a little. You okay? Whatever. Maybe they might look at a hand wrap, whatever, with other officials. And Chuck would always say to them, Chuck was famous for saying, do not stop the fight unless I'm knocked out. Do me a favor. Do not stop the fight unless I'm not. Now, this is the equivalent in like NBA or whatever, or NFL. You know how the coaches are working the refs? Hey, ref, pay attention to that hand check. He's elbowing my guy, right? They're working the ref to get calls, right?
Right.
And so when Chuck Liddell at the height, at his zenith, would say that to a referee, do you think that carried some weight subconsciously with a ref to say, man, I can't stop a Chuck fight really quick?
Right.
Because he's already on you. Now, Chuck says that to the ref. What do you think Chuck says to John Hackelman and other people? Don't stop that fight unless I'm out. Now, at that point, you're knowing his wishes, even though you might be like, damn, I want to stop this. But you're thinking, you're torn because you love the guy and you know his wishes. What would he want? Just like when someone dies on us, right? When a loved one dies on us, and we say, you would think, later on, you'd be like, well, what would their wishes have been, right?
Yeah.
Did they want to be cremated? Did they want their ashes scattered? Not what do you want? What would they have wanted? So, in any event, I'm talking too long about this, but this issue is we should stay on this for a little bit. You guys can weigh in, but this is a very powerful issue, and it's complicated. It's really up to the ref. The ref is supposed to be objective, and it's up to the ringside physicians to see body language, to look at it. One thing I will say, they're stopping fights quicker than they used to. They are stopping fights quicker, and maybe they should be, because the reality is, in most of these situations, every once in a blue moon, you're going to see a fight like when Pete Drago fought, what's his name, Scott, gosh, what's his name? But every once in a while, you'll see that fight where a guy, Chuck Liddell, Rich Franklin's, about to get knocked out, and then he throws a haymaker and knocks out. Every once in a while, but most of the time, when you see the one-sided fight like we saw with Gaethje and Ferguson, it's like, dude, it's 99%. Why shorten the fighter's career? Why risk brain damage? For what? Right? It's inevitable. It's like, come on, stop. Even with Dominic Cruz, who I love, when Dominic Cruz just fought Cejudo and he didn't like the stop, and it's like, Dom had never been knocked out cold. He still hasn't, but that was a TKO, and it's like, I thought it was a bad stop. I thought they should have let it go more, but they're stopping them quicker now. You have to know that as a fighter. They're stopping them quicker.
Certain refs are, I think that certain referees are really good about letting it go. Like Herb Dean. When you see Herb Dean, it's like, he's going to let you die out there.
The big Italian ref, Magliano or whatever it is. He's done some great jobs. He's let some go. A lot of the best fights are when the referee is doing that perfect job, because if you have a referee who stops too quick, you don't have the come from behind fights, you don't have the drama, like Shogun Rua versus Henderson. I mean, if you had a ref who wanted to stop quick, you never would have had, that's arguably one of the 2 or 3 best fights in history, Shogun versus Dan Henderson. The referee deserves, every year those guys should be sending the referee, Christmas baskets and whatever, because you can't have that fight unless that referee is doing a phenomenal job. It can't happen.
Jordan, do you get FaceTime with the refs when you fight?
Do I get what with the refs when I fight?
FaceTime. Do they come back and talk to you before the fight? Do you recall?
I don't really pay attention to who I'm talking to before I fight. It's mainly the commissioners. The referee talks at the rules meeting, but I don't listen to anything that people say at the rules meeting. But yeah, the referees talk a little bit at the rules meeting. They don't really talk to you before the fight too much. I have seen it happen in certain occasions. Like, they talk to people like they know the fighter personally, but it's not like they go up and they have a reason to be.
Okay.
But okay, cool. Getting back to letting fighters go on and how they're stopping fights a little bit quicker nowadays, I totally agree, Frank. I think they're stopping fights a lot faster than I'm ever really used to, or I grew up watching MMA that I was used to. Like, even when I was a really young boy, I grew up watching UFC 1, UFC 2, UFC 3, like the beginning, the caveman days of the UFC. That's what I was watching it from the start because of my dad. So I grew up watching a lot of these fights, and they, for sure, compared to the old days, compared to now, they're stopping fights a lot faster than they used to.
Yep.
Like, especially with that Dominic Cruz fight. I think Dominic's never been knocked out before. In my eyes, Dominic still has never been knocked out. I think that TKO, he could have gone a little bit more. He was getting up, like he said.
Same thing with TJ Dillashaw. They stopped the Dillashaw-Cejudo fight. That fight was stopped a little bit quick for a lot of people's taste, too. Remember when Cejudo beat Dillashaw, hurt him, stunned him, same kind of deal. And then Dillashaw, it's never good, guys, when the fight is stopped and the fighter pops right up to his feet and is coherent and aware. That's never good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Normally, you want the guy to be a little bit woozy or slow to get up. When the fighter gets up and is like looking at you and he's very conscious and he's very aware and he's very alert, that the optics of that aren't very good. And that's what happened with Dillashaw, and that's what happened with Cruz.
Yeah, I agree, Frank. If in my eyes, if a fight is supposed to be stopped, that fighter is supposed to be incapacitated. Right? They're not. They're done. If that fight there was no referee there, in my eyes, the guy is going to be killed. You know what I mean? That guy is going to be beat into a pulp until he is knocked out completely, or worse. So the referee is there to save the fighter, and if the referee jumps in and the fighter jumps up and he's fine, the referee didn't really save the fighter, you know what I mean? But it's also up to the fighter there's also the counter argument where it's also up to the fighter to intelligently defend themselves at all times and not look like they're taking a bunch of punishment. If you're taking 10 unanswered shots after you just got hit with a knee and got dropped down to the floor like a Dominic Cruz's situation, there's an argument there that fight needs to be stopped. You know, like you can't be taking 10 unanswered shots after you just got hit by a really, really big shot.
Yeah, so sometimes Jordan, it just doesn't look good. Sometimes it just doesn't look good to the casual fan, even though the fighter's covering up and not getting hit by clean shots, right? So they're 10 shots, but none of them are landing really clean sometimes, but it just doesn't look good to the casual fan who's like, oh my God, stop the fight, right? But you're looking at it, you're like, those didn't land. A lot of times the guy's down and he's covered and they're not really landing, you know?
I think that's what I was going to
get
around to saying. That's what I was going to get around to saying is I think that one reason why they're stopping these fights a little bit quicker is another attempt to try and make MMA a little mainstream. You know, like it's easier to sell MMA the less barbaric it is and the more sporty it is. I feel like that's why we've been doing all this stuff with MMA. Frank, me personally, I don't even believe in gloves, dude. I think headbutts should be legal. I don't think they should be fighting with gloves. I don't think they should be fighting with hand wraps. I think 12-6 elbows should be legal. I think soccer kicks should be legal. All of this should be legal. This is combat, dude. This is a fight. But you need to put all these rules in place to make the mom and pops be able to watch it at the dinner table when they're eating a dinner and be like, oh yeah, this is civilized things that normal people do.
I don't know if I could eat dinner watching a UFC fight.
Well, this
bowl
is
of spaghetti.
I want to run with this. I want to run with this because this has got me revved up, and this is a great topic. So you guys are looking. There's a lot of tie-ins. You're gonna have to give me like 5 minutes, and then I'll give you the air, Noah. But I got it. So Holyfield.
Let it rip.
Evander Holyfield might be coming out of retirement. This all ties in.
Woo! Yes, I'm excited about this.
Super excited.
Tyson, I don't know if that's Tyson versus Holyfield or whatever, but there's a rumor that they're both coming back.
Yes. I think that is confirmed. No, that's confirmed. So, Tyson Holyfield 3 in the Middle East.
So there's Saudi Arabia, I think. So there's no and Saudi Arabia is trying to get some marquee fights because they had the fight, the rematch between the Mexican guy Ruiz and I think it was Ruiz and Joshua Anthony Joshua, right? So they had a big fight.
The Saudis need some money. The Saudis need some money right now. They're hemorrhaging. Yes.
But so Holyfield fighting is going to cause a stir. It won't cause a stir here because maybe no athletic commission. This is part of the reason that they would probably do it in Saudi Arabia because in America, once you're past 35, the athletic commission's very strict on all the tests. The older you get, 35, 40, they're very strict on all your brain tests and everything. They put you through the gamut, to make sure that you're okay. So that's number one. By going to another country, you may not have the same scrutiny as you would have by the New Jersey Athletic Commission or New York or Nevada. So you can circumvent that and navigate that a lot easier because Lord only knows I love Evander Holyfield, a warrior among warriors, as brave as we've ever seen. But I don't know if it's a good idea. Even though I actually think I would favor Holyfield in this fight. I actually favor Holyfield. But in any event, this strikes at the root of what we're talking about, which is this thing with stopping fights is kind of like the NFL too. The NFL where you can't really hit the quarterback the same as you used to be able to in the old days, and that obviously affects the game. It's like, wait, if you don't let me rough up the passer a little bit, how am I going to stop? That's the reason that they're getting all these yards. It's hard to stop these great quarterbacks when you can't hit them and you can't really put a big hit on them, right? And so it's the same. It's very similar, but you have to think about this. You had the class action lawsuit with the NFL, right, for damage. So they had a settlement there, right? They had a settlement for some of the older players. They've had to crack down and take a lot of precautions. The UFC, it is inevitable that at some point there will probably be, this is my opinion, at some point with what Lou Ruvo was doing for brain health and helping the fighters, if I'm the UFC, if I own the UFC, I am worried about a class action lawsuit 5 years, 10 years down the line saying, hey, I was damaged, you guys should have done more, should have been more scrutiny, and that is really bad optics. The other thing is, because you got it. So fighter safety is a big deal. The other thing is, imagine if there was a fighter who died, Noah. Imagine if just one fighter dies. As safe as they've made UFC for the most part, I mean, they've made it a lot safer, I think, than boxing. As much as they've done a good job, them and the commissions, it is inevitable that at some point, either during a weight cut, I mean, we've seen fighters die in other places from the weight cut, not necessarily from the fight, but maybe the weight cut, but in the combination of a fight and a weight cut, because the weight cut can affect your when you take the shot. A lot of the sort of the jelly that protects your brain is the water. So when you're dehydrated, that would increase, right? If you have a really bad weight cut, your susceptibility, your chin, a lot of your water, your wiggle, your brain protection, some of that is water. Some of that's hydration. The more dehydrated you are, the more that brain is just crashing against skull, right?
Yeah, it would be good to know if there's been any studies done, with hydration tests, and do some statistical analyses of that issue.
We've seen that. I'm not going to say. I had a guy I trained with the Drysdales, very good fighter in his prime, and he had a lot of trouble with the weight cuts. And his chin, he had a good chin, but his chin was not the same on fight nights. He was having these bad weight cuts, and his chin was a fraction of what it had been. And that was one of the theories. I subscribe to it, which is when you're underhydrated, you're not going to have the same chin, because also you're not going to have the same cardiovascular. And your cardiovascular is linked kind of like a Frankie Edgar. The guys that are, you look at fighting, the people with the best cardio a lot of times can bounce back and weather the storm, and then they come back and they have great cardio. And your hydration is linked to your cardio and your output and your energy.
That wouldn't be a heavyweight. That wouldn't be a former heavyweight UFC fighter, would that?
No, that was
okay.
Well, Frankie Edgar was one who. Remember, you can't get Frankie Edgar tired. He's just.
Oh no, I went in front of him. Yeah.
You could hurt Frankie Edgar.
Another Frank in Vegas.
Yeah, the cardio guys. Some of the best chins we've ever seen are also people who just by happenstance, whether it be Bernard Hopkins or Frankie Edgar, even the Diaz brothers, a lot of these guys that don't get tired. It winds up being that they actually have, a lot of them have great chins too, right? There's a link there between your bounce back, your ability to recover. So when you start talking about hydration, you're talking about your cardiovascular output, you're talking about your ability to recover. I think that there's a link there, but also when you talk about your brain, if you get hit by hard shots, your brain is crashing against skull. Okay, and so what is going to protect that and give that some gel, right? I mean, the hydration is relevant to that. So in any event, I think that it is wise and prudent for the UFC now being on ESPN. It's like, it's wise to do that and look down the road and say, look, we don't want to pay out the wazoo for a big lawsuit. We want to protect fighter safety. One other thing, because you remember Pride, right? And so Japan, UFC wind up buying Pride, but Pride was just captured our imaginations, right? When we were, many years ago in the early 2000s, and it was like, Pride was just as awesome to watch as UFC. And one of the big things with Pride that made it so fascinating, because I never liked the ring of Pride. I never liked the ring. But what I did like was the white canvas, because the white canvas, what would happen to that white canvas fight by fight by fight?
Oh, yeah,
that canvas would get bloody. Well, so that was part of the what made Pride so compelling was the intro, the sort of the fight mantras, the way they would enter into the fights, the white canvas, the purity of that in a way, right? The purity of a white canvas and seeing, the fighters almost seemed to glow. And because it was a ring, even though I don't like ring fights, because it was a ring, your intimacy with the fighters was even greater. The cage conjures up a certain image and it captures our imaginations, like with cage fighting in WWE. But the cage also obstructs your optics a little bit, right? It has, if you're watching from the fans, you're looking through a cage, and it can obstruct, especially if you're live at the event. In Pride, because of the ring, you were very intimate. You could see every part of the fighter at all time, and then you could see that white contrast. When people started bleeding, it was like, oh wow, look at that pristine white mat, the purity of it, and there's blood everywhere. Well, the UFC, I'm thinking, from what I see, they don't really like or celebrate the blood on the canvas. It seemed like Pride would intentionally wanted the white canvas because it illuminated things, but also they wanted to see the blood spill. They wanted that to be part of the spirit, part of the show. The UFC goes out of its way now, especially since they were on Fox and ESPN. I'm not saying
ESPN's Disney. We're talking about UFC is on Disney.
one thing that would be fascinating, and I would say this to the fan, and the next time you go to a live UFC, whenever that is, who knows when that's going to be. The next time you go to a live UFC, and when you watch a really bloody fight, you're going to see, you stay for the whole undercard, you watch 11 fights, and when you watch a really bloody fight, I want you to watch, when that fight is over, how diligently and frantically a team is coming in to disinfect the mats and try to clean it up for the visual.
I've been seeing it. No, yeah. I've been seeing it this week. Now, question for you about those mats, because like last night was another gore fest. It's just blood everywhere. What do they do with those mats? What happens to the mats? Do you know?
Well, I know in the old days, like if you go to Randy Couture's gym in Las Vegas, and love Randy, and he's got a great gym. I think he's got 11,000, 14,000 square feet there.
It's huge.
Some people were able to get the mats. I don't know how, but it'd be like Randy would, win a title fight and wind up with the mat. And the mat might have autographs on it somewhere. It might still be blood stained. And if you go, the last time I was in Randy's gym about a year ago, it was like you go in there and you have the big canvas of some fight, and it has some stains on, some blood stains and things, and it's up there when you first come in, and in addition to, he has cages and mats and everything. But I know that some people have gotten them, but I don't know what they do with them now, because you're talking about history too. Let's imagine, I remember with Conor McGregor, I think the last time I was at UFC Performance Institute, there was they had a boxing ring there at the UFC Performance Institute, and it had and now this was a UFC Performance Institute gym, but it had a Conor McGregor special mat. And when you stepped into the boxing thing, I guess Conor had done a lot of his practice for the Mayweather fight in that performance thing. And, for visuals, right, when media came in there, they would see Conor, and it'd have Conor's promotion or whatever. Now, I don't know what happens at this. Conor get that? I'm sure that's probably not there anymore in the boxing ring, right? It's what happens to that mat? Does Conor get to take it, or does the UFC put it in a museum somewhere that they have planned, or for when they do the UFC fight weeks, are they going to have memorabilia? Are they going to auction it off? I don't know what happens to that.
Or do they cremate them?
Yeah, I mean, it's
because it's medical waste in some ways, because you have the blood pathogens.
Well, I would say, that's interesting. Yeah,
that's how I thought about it. I was like, it's actually medical waste.
But you could laminate it in a way now. You could probably do something. But what's interesting is when I worked for UFC and I worked closely with Dana for a couple of years, I remember we were on the Ultimate Fighter set. I was on the set of a couple of Ultimate Fighters. And I remember one time going in there, and Dana was going through all the gear. They had the shirts like Matt Serra versus, Matt Hughes. And there were all the shirts, the TUF shirts, the tank tops and everything. And I remember him just giving some. And I've always kept those. I've never worn them. And just little things like that.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know you.
Giving you stuff and saying, here. And I always thought, most people would wear it. And I just thought, man, Dana White gave me that. I'm going to keep that. I'm not gonna, I'm never wearing that, So it is interesting how certain things can have a sentimental value. That's and those mats or gloves can have a sentimental value to, one of the gestures when fighters retire. Remember when Randy Couture retired the first time before he came out of retirement? The gesture for wrestlers when they retire is they'll leave their wrestling mat. They'll leave the wrestling shoes on the mat. That's the gesture of I'm retired.
Yeah.
And Randy did that during his first retirement. But those, those things could mean a lot. Sometimes, you have those things. It's what's interesting, Noah, and this is something that you'll relate to. When you think about some of the things that are most important to you in life, and you think about your life and what you've done, you made proud. A lot of times it's not the things we think. It's not the medals and all. It's little things like that. It could be something someone gave you, a locket. It could be a piece of jewelry. It could be, I remember I was staying at, one place with my friend, and she had all of this extra china, and she was from Hawaii, and it was I used some china that I didn't know was precious because it was in a normal area. And she's like, my mom gave me that, and it was this really precious, and I was like, oh my God, I felt bad that I, ate a piece of whatever food on that. It's some things like that can carry so much sentimental value. And so we might not think of that, but a lot of the fight game can be that. It's not always belts. Belts are just, for some reason, they're nice to look at. They're a great gesture for fans. Fans love to see fighters with belts, and it helps to sell. But I remember Matt Hughes. So I interviewed Matt Hughes multiple for many magazine stories before his train crash. And Matt Hughes had won. Back then, they used to give you a new UFC title every time you won. So if you were Matt Hughes and you won 9 in a row, right? You were the champ, and you fought 9. You defended the belt 9 times in a row. You were considered a 9-time UFC champion. And that's kind of crazy. Is that every time you defended the belt, you're a 9-time champion. So Matt Hughes is a 9-time. Anderson Silva is a 12-time UFC champion. Well, they stopped that eventually. They're like, we can't be giving a guy. So you would get a new belt. Matt Hughes had 9 belts. I did a story on him about like Matt Hughes, who has the most belts, right? And Matt Hughes had a bunch, and Anderson Silva had a bunch. And I interviewed Matt, and I'm like, well, where are all those belts? And he didn't know where most of them were. Because what's the point? You would think like that's just so precious. He was like, well, I think one's under my bed and one's here, and one literally.
Yeah. Well, it looks like there you are. You there? Hey, I can't hear you, buddy. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I'm going to have to stop this podcast.